Buenas tardes. En atención a nuestro distinguido invitado, el profesor George Loewenstein, esta ceremonia se va a conducir en inglés. Good afternoon. It is with great pleasure that we welcome you all to the Universidad del Pacífico and to this ceremony in which the title of Honorary Professor of Universidad del Pacífico will be conferred on George Loewenstein, Herbert A. Simon University Professor of Economics and Psychology at Carnegie Mellon University. We will begin this ceremony with a presentation of Professor Loewenstein by Professor Francisco Galarza, head of the Academic Department of Economics of our university. Professor Galarza, if you would be kind enough to step up to the podium.
Hola a todos, bienvenidos. Voy a empezar en español y después voy a pasar a inglés. Estimada rectora, profesora Marta Chávez, estimada vicerrectora académica, profesora Arlet Beltrán, estimado vicerrector de investigación, profesor Gustavo Llamada, estimado decano de la Facultad de Economía y Finanzas, profesor Juan Francisco Castro, estimado vicedecano de Economía, profesor Pablo Lavado, estimadas autoridades académicas, estimados profesores y estudiantes, señoras y señores. Procederé ahora a hablar en inglés por una distinción con nuestro invitado. It is an honor to be in this ceremony for the appointment of an honorary professorship, the highest academic distinction granted by our university to Dr. George Loewenstein, who is the Herbert A. Simon University Professor of Economics and Psychology in the Social and Decision Sciences Department at Carnegie Mellon University. Born in Boston, US in 1955, Professor Loewenstein received a BA in Economics, magna cum laude, from Brandeis University in 1977, and a PhD in Economics from Yale University in 1985. It is worth mentioning that despite his formal training in economics, he has always been interested in psychology. In the fall of 1985, he joined the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business as an assistant professor of behavioral science. In 1990, he moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to join Carnegie Mellon University as an associate professor of economics. And 2 years later, he became professor of economics and psychology. He currently holds visiting positions at the London School of Economics and the Arctic University of Norway, and has had fellowships from the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences, the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, the Russell Sage Foundation, and the Institute for Advanced Study in Berlin. He is past president of the Society for Judgment and Decision Making, fellow of the American Psychological Society, fellow of the Econometric Society, and he became a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2008. He was also distinguished with honorary doctorates from the University of Warwick in 2014 and the City University of London and Tilburg University in 2016. Professor Loewenstein is one of the founders of the field of behavioral economics that brings psychological insights into economics, the field of neuroeconomics that looks at how decision-making happens inside the brain, and was one of the early proponents of the new approach to public policy called libertarian paternalism, which is one of the milestones of behavioral economics. His multifaceted research includes the topics of bargaining and social comparison, conflict of interest, emotions and taste prediction, generosity, intertemporal choice, mental accounting, neural activity and its correlation with choice, preferences, sex and relationships, sympathy, privacy, and the psychology and economics of information. In addition to several health and policy issues, including diet, smoking, obesity, addiction, and even the environment. As a result of his extensive and interdisciplinary work Professor Loewenstein has had a very prolific intellectual production. His vast number of academic publications includes over 300 journal articles published in journals in economics, psychology, law, and medicine, among other fields, in addition to numerous book chapters. Also outstanding are his large academic network of colleagues. He has more than 300 co-authors, and the intellectual influence of his work shown by his extraordinary citations record, an H index of 168, and over 165,000 citations, according to Google Scholar, as of today. From the broad sets of topics Professor Loewenstein has worked on, I have picked two that I hope will illustrate some of his insightful ideas: decision-making across time, also called intertemporal choice, and decision-making across hot and cold emotional states. In 1987, he published his first journal article titled Anticipation and Evaluation of Delayed Consumption. In this article, he introduces an insight into the discounted utility theory that dates back to Jeremy Bentham. The idea is that the anticipation of the future has an impact on pleasure, or savoring, and pain, or dread. This sensitivity of intertemporal choice to savoring and dread will lead to a systematic bias in the estimation of conventional discount rates. But also, the use of the concept of savoring and dread may help explain some anomalous behavior in savings. For instance, though individuals may be incapable of saving for retirement in the abstract, they can save for a retirement apartment, a concrete goal that seems to bring individuals what William Stanley Jevons would call anticipal pleasure, which is the positive utility from anticipation, in this case, the purchase of the apartment. In later work, Professor Loewenstein showed that anticipation of an outcome may also guide our behavior. The second line of research I would like to highlight is the role of emotions, or more generally, affects, such as thirst, hunger, sadness, pain, and anger, in decision-making. The goal here is to bring affects into economics. In this work, Professor Loewenstein investigates how people will react when they are in a cold affective state, which is when affects are absent. Say you are happy, compared to being in a hot affective state when our affects are pulling us. Say you are angry. While it's widely known that people behave differently when they are in different affective states, his research shows that when people are in a cold state, it's difficult for them to predict how they would behave if they were in a hot state, and vice versa. This reference-dependent state relates to the notion he developed, the empathy gap, the idea that when we are in one affect state, it is difficult to imagine how we would feel or behave in another state. More generally, these affective systematic prediction errors illustrate how the policy prescriptions made on the basis of conventional analysis, which is assuming perfect forecasts of our behavior and that of the others, may be off target. With this short biographical sketch, Dr. Loewenstein, I wanted to summarize his contribution to economics, and more broadly to our understanding of human behavior. Your groundbreaking work is a testimony to the breadth of your curiosity, nonconformity with conventional wisdom, and your openness to experience. The Universidad del Pacífico is proud to have Dr. George Loewenstein among its honorary professors, an economist with the soul of a psychologist, whose career path is indubitably a beacon of inspiration. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Galarza. I would now like to invite Professor Marta Chavez, Rector of Universidad del Pacífico, and Professor Loewenstein to the stage, please. During this part of the ceremony, our rector will present Professor Loewenstein with a medal and diploma that accredit him as honorary professor of our university. Please allow me to read the text of the diploma. Considering that Dr. George Loewenstein, in recognition of the extraordinary relevance of his research in the field of behavioral economics, has earned institutional recognition, the University Council of Universidad del Pacífico agrees to confer upon him the title of honorary professor as a special distinction and grants him this diploma so that he be acknowledged as such. Lima, October 25th, 2024. Please remain for the pictures, yes. I would like to invite our academic vice rector, Professor Arlet Beltran, our research vice rector, Professor Gustavo Yamada, the dean of the School of Economics and Finance, Professor Juan Francisco Castro, and Professor Francisco Galarza, head of the academic department of economics, to join our rector and Professor Loewenstein on the stage for a picture. Yes, please. Okay, we will now hear Professor Loewenstein's keynote lecture.
Thank you. It's so much nicer to be looking at all of you than to be looking at a huge photo of myself, which is always painful, but especially because it was much earlier, so it reminds me of how much has changed. Before I give the lecture about the new economics of information, I just want to say how incredibly honored I am to get the honorary degree from you, and also how touched I am by the incredible hospitality that everyone has shown me. Let me just, so many people have been amazingly wonderful hosts and generous with their time and attention, but I just wanted to mention Professor Stanislao Maldonado, who invited me and actually set up a whole trip in South America, which has been really exciting. And also Tio Panchega, where are you? Yeah, who is Pancheco, sorry, who has been so generous in arranging everything. And so with that, let me talk about the new economics of information. You're probably wondering what's the economics of information, what's the new economics of information. That's not a typo. The word usually flags it when I put the same word twice in a row. So the economics of information began with George Stigler. I was once his colleague at the University of Chicago in 1961, and he pointed out that information is a scarce commodity like any other. It can be bought and sold. And Stigler had a very particular view of information. He thought that the value of information resided only in the way that information helps us to make better decisions. The only reason we value information is because it helps us to make better decisions. And according to this perspective, information or valid information will never be actively avoided. At worst, we'll just ignore it. We'll take in the information and just not pay any attention to it. When he collected his Nobel Prize, in his acceptance speech, he said that the absence of controversy was due to the fact that no established scientific theory was being challenged by this work. All I challenged was the neglect of a promising subject. That's, for students here, and maybe junior faculty, it's always, the best types of research projects are ones that where they're new intellectual domain, and there's not a lot of people who have worked in the area who have their axes sharpened with their own ideas, and they're ready to kind of cut down anything that you propose. In 1970s, we had what has been called the new economics of information, and that is research on asymmetric information, on the idea that different people possess different amounts of information. And George Akerlof, Michael Spence, and Joseph Stiglitz all collected Nobel Prizes. They shared a Nobel Prize for this work. To give an example of this work, if you buy a new car, the moment you drive it off the lot, the value of the car declines pretty dramatically. Now, why is that? It's because you've driven the car, you have special information, insight into the quality of the car, and you know if you will know pretty quickly if the car is a lemon. But the prospective buyer won't share that information. That's the case of asymmetric information, and that's so they're going to worry, why is he selling his new car? Well, maybe because it's a lemon. This is called the lemons phenomenon, proposed by George Akerlof, or adverse selection is a more formal name. But the important thing about the new economics of information is it retained Stigler's assumption that the value of information resides from its ability to improve decision-making, and only from that. It's often said that we're in the age of information. Here's a book, titled weirdly, The Information. I think, and I'm going to ask the question right now of whether it's time for a new economics of information. What would be the foundation of a new economics of information? It would be something called belief-based utility. Belief-based utility is the idea that we don't only get utility, like pleasure and pain, from things like consumption, leisure, things that economists usually focus on. We get a lot of pleasure and pain, probably a whole lot more than from consumption, from what we believe. And the number one kind of belief that really brings us a lot of pleasure and pain is our ego, like things about ourselves. Like if we feel good if we think we're a good person, smart person, nice person, and so on. And the ego, basically ego. I think ego is a way more important determinant of our utility or our well-being than things like consumption and leisure, the things that economics usually focuses on. So I think I've kind of said that. So belief-based utility is the idea that most pleasures and pains are in our mind. And that's something that I've been thinking about for a long time. And there's also a classic book chapter by Tom Schelling, another Nobel Prize winner. And the book chapter is titled "The Mind as a Consuming Organ." And it's all about how most consumption isn't of the physical type. Most consumption that we engage in happens purely in our brains. Belief-based utility has a lot of consequences. So standard economics assumes that people are Bayesian, where we rationally update beliefs based on our own information. So we're always trying to construct the best possible beliefs to allow us to make the best possible decisions. Belief-based utility introduces the idea that people are motivated to hold certain beliefs because they feel good or because they fit into the sense that we've made of the world. And belief-based utility, so standard economics assumes that we process information in an unbiased fashion, but belief-based utility introduces the idea of motivated cognition. If you want to believe something and you're processing evidence, processing information, you approach the problem with the mindset, can I believe it? Is there any way that I can process the information I'm receiving to reach the conclusion that I want to reach? That's called motivated cognition. And if you don't want to believe something, you have the opposite mindset. You're approaching the information with the mindset, must I believe it? Is there any way that I can avoid what the evidence is pointing to be able to retain what I want to believe? People also get attached to their beliefs, and they defend their beliefs like they would defend possessions. My psychologist, doctoral advisor, Robert Abelson, wrote a book chapter a long time ago titled Beliefs Are Like Possessions, in which he connected the way our attitudes towards information and the connection to how we also deal with material possessions. Here's an interesting study by Dan Kahan from 2015. It's about the connection between scientific intelligence and the belief that climate change is real. Do you think that people who are more knowledgeable about science are more or less likely to believe in climate change? Okay, how many people, you can raise your hand, how many people believe that if you're more knowledgeable about science, you're more likely to believe in climate change? Yeah. And how many believe the opposite? Okay. And you probably are wondering if it's a trick question, but it isn't. You're right. People who have more scientific intelligence are more moderately likely to believe in climate change. But here's the interesting part of it. If you divide respondents into Republicans and Democrats, left-wingers and right-wingers, you see a fascinating pattern. The more scientifically intelligent a liberal, like a Democrat is, the more they believe in climate change, and it's very dramatic. But the more scientifically knowledgeable and intelligent a Republican is, the less they believe in climate change. How do you interpret that? Well, my interpretation, and actually the Dan Kahan's interpretation, is that people use their intelligence not to arrive at the truth, but to arrive at the conclusion that they want to arrive at. And if you're kind of more scientifically knowledgeable, you can use that knowledge to come up with reasons why climate change isn't real. All right. In this talk, I'm going to discuss 4 information-related phenomena that first don't fit at all with standard economic models, but second, they're key to recent developments in things like social media, e-commerce, and the internet. And you can understand these 4 phenomena. These 4 phenomena can be put on a matrix where the rows are obtain information or share information, like share information with other people, and the columns are you want to do it or you want to not do it. And I'm going to talk about each of these quadrants. These are all things that I have done a lot of research on. I'm going to only talk about very small bits of research for each of the 4, just to illustrate the ideas. But I decided I wanted to talk about these 4, and then afterwards I realized, they fit on a 2x2 matrix. I love 2x2 matrices. I think if you scanned my brain with a fMRI scanner, you'd see a 2x2 matrix in my brain. The first one is curiosity. That's the desire to obtain information. And importantly, curiosity is specifically not what Stigler was talking about. Curiosity is the desire for information for its own sake, not because it's going to bring you material gains. And in 1994, I wrote a paper titled The Psychology of Curiosity, a review and reinterpretation, published in the Psychology Journal. And in this article, I propose a new account of curiosity based on what I call an information gap. To be curious, you have to be aware that there's information that you could have, but you don't have it. And so I've written a number of papers arguing that curiosity is a drive, very much like hunger. So hunger is a kind of a gap. You don't have food, you'd like to have food. Curiosity is similarly a gap. You'd like to have specific information and you don't have it. In the article, I enumerate some of curiosity's most salient features. The first is how intense curiosity can be. It can be very, very highly motivating, that you're desperate to get this information, even though by definition, curiosity has no material or extrinsic benefit to you. So it's kind of perplexing how something that will not give you any material advantages can be so motivating. The second is how stimulus-dependent and transient curiosity can be. Have you ever had the experience you're walking down the street and there's somebody in front of you as you're walking, and maybe they're dressed strangely. Something makes you wonder, like, what do they look like from the front? Have you ever had that experience? Okay. And, well, let's say you have enough self-control so you don't kind of walk quickly forward and glance back. And then a moment later, they turn the corner and walk away. Within seconds of their disappearance, your intense curiosity disappears. That's an illustration of how stimulus-dependent curiosity is. And the last feature I talk about is how curiosity can be so intense, and yet when you actually get the information, it can be extremely disappointing, or even in some cases, you can actually pursue information and you know it's going to make you miserable when you get the information. And there's a few papers illustrating that. There's a paper by Kruger and Evans, The Paradox of Alypius and the Pursuit of Unwanted Information. And in the last study, Alypius is someone who St. Thomas Aquinas wrote about. His friends dragged him to a gladiator fight in ancient Rome, and he absolutely didn't want to go, but finally they dragged him into the stadium, but he said, I'm going to close my eyes. I don't want to see all the blood and all the gore. And then and so he had his eyes covered, and then the crowd went wild and they were screaming, and so he couldn't resist, and he opened his eyes, and then he saw the gory scene, and it was very miserable. The last study in Kruger and Evans' paper, he interviews private eyes, like private detectives, and the private detectives, probably the main thing that they are hired to do is they're hired to, if you suspect that your spouse is being unfaithful to you, they track your spouse and take pictures, maybe for lawsuits or maybe just because you want to know. And then they always give the person who hired them the opportunity to see the photos. And the private detectives always say, you shouldn't look at these photos. Don't look at these photos. But here they are. Of course, that's irresistible to people. And it's a beautiful illustration of how curiosity often motivates us to see information that we know beforehand is going to make us miserable. Here's another kind of amusing example. She and Juan, Curiosity Kills the Cat. They put somebody in a laboratory in front, like they seat them at a desk, and there's a bin of pens in the desk. And they are told that some of the pens, if you click, they're ballpoint pens, if you click them, they're going to give you an electric shock. And so usually people sit there for a while and like, who wants to get an electric shock? But after a while, they get curious. Like they get, maybe first they're curious, like what does it feel like? And so they take a pen out, click it, nothing happens. They take another pen out, click, they get zapped. Like, but the weird thing is, some people don't even stop there. Some people, well, I wonder if the blue pen is one of the pens that's going to give me a shock. And it's a very strange experiment. I'll show you just, I've done a lot of research on curiosity. I'm going to show you just one study that I ran. And this study manipulated the feeling of getting closer to or getting further away from receiving non-instrumental information, like information that has no material benefit. And this was done with 162 CMU graduates. Think about how hungry you get right around dinner time. The time starts approaching when you're going to be able to eat. Think about how hungry that makes you. And when you're far away, you're much less, when dinner's an hour off, you're much less hungry. And this kind of plays on that idea that when you feel like you're getting close to addressing the information gap, you're going to become more curious. And so the subjects in this study, they watched short animations, up to 5, of famous Carnegie Mellon University's graduates. And these were graduates of Carnegie Mellon themselves, the subjects. And there were 2 conditions: forward, where you felt like you were getting closer to getting the information, and reverse, where you felt like you were getting further away. And then after the animation stopped, at a point where they probably couldn't tell who the person was, they had to click on the computer, and we didn't tell them how much they had to click. It was quite a lot, if they wanted to have the animation finished and for the information to be shown to them. So here's how it worked. This is a condition where they're getting closer to the information. More and more refined, see? Knowing who it is, like, it seems so obvious, but does anybody recognize this person? Okay. And here's the reverse condition. It starts coarse and gets, condition. It gets further away. And then they have an opportunity to resolve it, so it becomes a resolved photograph. By the way, so no one knows who this is. It's the author Kurt Vonnegut. We're very proud of him, even though he only spent part of a year at our university, but we kind of think of him as an alumni. And here are the results. In the forward condition, they were much more likely to click sufficiently to see the image continue to resolve. Okay, so that was curiosity, which is the desire to obtain information. And now I want to talk about the opposite cell of the matrix, and that is the desire to not share information. And that's the topic of privacy. I've been very interested in the psychology of privacy. So privacy is arguably the social science issue of the internet age. New technologies allow unprecedented collection of data, whether you're aware of it or not. When you walk around carrying your cell phone, that's being recorded. Your cell phone is probably recording your conversations. I remember my wife and I, we rented a car, and they'd kind of run out of the crummy cars they wanted to rent to us, and so all they had was a Mercedes. And so we were driving around in a Mercedes, and I can't remember who said it, but one of us said to the other, like, this Mercedes is really a disappointment. And then all of a sudden the car spoke up. The car said, what can I help you with? And then we realized that the car was listening to us the whole time we were driving, and the car was probably really upset with what it had just heard. New businesses, so if you drive on the highway, if you get on the internet, in a lot of websites like Amazon, not only every click, but whenever you move your cursor around, it's being picked up. And then all of this information is being sold to people who can exploit it. And I'm sure you've experienced situations where you had a conversation with a friend, and then immediately after you get on the internet and it starts giving you advertisements for things from the conversation, and then you realize, oh, everything I say is being listened to and processed and shared. Data can be used for purposes other than intended. This is a website called Real Age, Live Life to the Youngest. So you know how old you are, right? But what you might not know is your health age, your real age. And what do we all hope? That our health age or our real age is younger or older than our chronological age. What do we want? Younger, of course. And real age will give you the answer. And it asks you questions. And at first, the questions are very innocuous, like maybe your gender, your chronological age. But then the questions get more and more personal and intrusive. But you're so desperate. After you answer a bunch of questions, you get more and more desperate. I want to know the answer. I want to know the answer. So you keep giving it more and more information. And of course, what's the real purpose of Real Age? The purpose is to harvest your information and then sell it to other people. Like if it decides your real age is younger than your chronological age, that means if it decides that you are really healthy, what's it going to sell you? It's going to sell you annuities that pay. It's going to sell you insurance. Depending on what the real age is, you're either going to start getting advertisements for insurance or for annuities. And once on the internet, information cannot be erased, which creates the phenomenon of digital skeletons in the closet. And information is easily forwarded and shared, which creates the phenomenon of digital shaming. And it's a very prominent phenomenon. This is one of the earliest examples of digital shaming. This is a woman who is widely known worldwide as the dog poop girl. And she was on the subway in Korea, and her dog pooped on the floor of the subway, and someone asked her to clean it up, and she refused. And all of this was caught on video, and it was posted to the web, and it went viral, and she became just a pariah, an object of derision in Korea, and in fact in the whole world. And she actually had to get plastic surgery and drop out of university. So all you students, be careful what you do, because it could be recorded. All right. There's a lot of evidence that people have difficulty navigating these complexities. People voluntarily post personal and even self-incriminating information. This is a website called 30 Reasons Girls Should Call It a Night. And people post their own pictures of vomiting and other things. You should never be on this website, because you probably know that if you apply for a job, almost for sure your prospective employer is going to be looking for you on the web. Have you ever wanted to use an app and there's a pop-up box appears at the bottom and says, okay? That's, how many of you commonly read the box? Okay, nobody, yeah. So that's fewer than 3%, but 3% of consumers say that they read those boxes. 75% of consumers think that the evidence of a privacy policy, the text inside the box, implies that you're protected, when of course it's exactly the opposite. When you click OK, you're giving them permission to use the information however they want. Most people, if you tried to read the box, you wouldn't be able to because it's all legalese. It's been estimated that if people actually read the information in the boxes, the cost in terms of people's time would be $652 billion a year, the cost of people's time in trying to read those boxes. This is a funny study that was done early in the days of the Wi-Fi. Some researchers set up a Wi-Fi source in London, and the thing that if you read the box, you would discover that what you were agreeing to, if you clicked OK, was to give your firstborn child to give up your firstborn child to the researchers. And of course, lots of people clicked OK unknowingly. What would standard economics say about privacy? Well, of course, you should think about the benefits and the costs of exposing your information. And standard economics assumes that people's privacy preferences should be coherent, consistent, and based on an underlying fundamental values. Behavioral economics challenges these assumptions based on the idea of preference. One of the ideas in behavioral economics is preference uncertainty. We often don't know what we like, we don't know what we want, and when that situation happens, we do our best to construct our preferences, and we often use cues in our environment to know how we should behave. And this leads to a wide range of effects. Here's a few of the studies that I've done on this area. The impact of relative standards on the propensity to disclose. We show that people take their cue about whether to answer questions based on whether they see other people answering those questions. And like, should you post a picture of yourself, an embarrassing picture of yourself on Facebook, for example? Well, probably the main determinant of whether you do that is whether your friends are doing that. And so that's all about the effect of relative experiences. In a study titled Misplaced Confidences, Privacy and the Control Paradox, we show that when you give people more granular control over their privacy, they usually don't use that control, but it makes them trust you more. And so when you give them more control, they don't exert the control, but they reveal more information. And actually, Facebook, you may have noted, well, you're probably not old enough, but Facebook has given people more and more granular control over their privacy. But what's their real agenda? Their real agenda is to make you feel confident about sharing stuff because they know you're not going to actually ask for to control it. In a study titled What is Privacy Worth? We show that how people value privacy depends a lot on what they are given to begin with. So we gave people at a mall, we had people at a mall complete a survey, and then some people we gave them a $10 gift certificate that had no privacy assurances associated with it. It was trackable. We could see what you were spending the money on. Other people got, $12 certificate with no protection. Other people got a $10 certificate with protection. So less money, more protection. And then we gave people the opportunity to exchange the gift certificate for the other kind of gift certificate. And very few people who were given more money gave up the money in exchange for more privacy, and very few people who were given less money and no privacy were willing to give up the $2 to get more privacy. And that was kind of the punchline of that study. We summarized a lot of this research and a lot of other people's research in a 2015 Science article. I'm going to show you one representative study, and it shows that the willingness to share information depends on arbitrary environmental cues that often bear little connection or even a negative connection to objective net benefits. This is titled Strangers on a Plane, and where does the title come from? Famously, if you're on a long distance flight, and famously people share private information with the person they're sitting next to who they don't know. Of course, it's also a play. And why is that? Because you don't know them. It's safe. It feels safe to share the information, and yet you're in intimate proximity to them. And of course, it's also a play on the Alfred Hitchcock movie, Strangers on a Train. Okay, here's how it worked. We asked people a bunch of questions, and some of the questions were either embarrassing or actually incriminating. And we had one professional website, the Carnegie Mellon University Executive Council Survey on Ethical Behavior. We actually had the provost of the university sign a statement saying that the website was secure. And then we had a baseline survey, and then this was the brainchild of the graduate student on the project, and she designed this website, How Bad Are You, with a little devil. And we asked people, which do you think is safer, the CMU Executive Council website or How Bad Are You? And overwhelmingly, people thought that the executive website was safer. But what happened when we asked people the questions on these two websites? Have you ever smoked marijuana? 26% with a CMU website, 35%. How bad are you? Have you ever cheated while in a relationship? 19% versus 31%. Have you ever driven intoxicated? 17%, 30%. This is my favorite one. Have you ever peeked at someone else's email without them knowing? 29% or 45%. Somehow I tend to think that the right-hand column is the truth. And what that tells you is when you never, ever leave your laptop open and walk away from it, or your cell phone accessible, because 45% of people admit that they sneak a peek on other people's phones or websites. We asked people, we were worried that maybe, how bad are you? People would want to kind of brag, oh, I'm really bad, like I smoke pot, like I cheat in relationships. But when we asked people, to what extent were you tempted to say yes to behaviors in which you have actually never engaged, no difference across the conditions, but to what extent were you tempted to say no to behaviors that you have engaged in, what you see is the How Bad Are You website is the outlier. So it really, How Bad Are You suppressed people's privacy concerns. Firms like Facebook know much more about privacy preferences than we do, and they exploit it. I already talked about how Facebook is giving us all this granular control over our information, but Facebook also knows that defaults, what happens if you don't use that granular control, matter a lot. This is very early in the days of Facebook, and the different segments of the pie are different kinds of information, and the different layers coming out are who. There's you, friends, the network, all Facebook users, or the entire internet. This is 2005. This is 2007. This is 2010. So Facebook is very, very crafty. They know a lot about psychology, and they use it to exploit you. Main conclusions from the privacy research. Concern about privacy is very context dependent. People's willingness to share information varies in response to cues that have little connection to the true costs and benefits of sharing and withholding, and new technologies greatly magnify these risks. For example, they introduce new cues like indications of community, friends on Facebook, for example, that actually mute privacy concern. And I think there's a real need for new regulations and legal protections to bring back the privacy that we have lost. So privacy research suggests that people don't really care very much about privacy unless you kind of ring alarm bells. And after I had done research on privacy for a number of years, I started to think, maybe because one of my many faults is that I tend to reveal too much information to people. What's that? To TMI. I'm a TMI person. And it occurred to me that really the desire to reveal information is a much more powerful motive than the desire to conceal it. And I've written a bunch of papers with titles like The Drive to Disclose. I believe that the desire to disclose is very much like curiosity, is very much like a physical drive. And so this brings us to the third quadrant, which is the desire to share information. If you think about Facebook feed, there's all sorts of people giving you information about their personal lives. Oh, there's a million different websites, confession websites. It's unbelievable how many there are. And people are madly getting on the internet and confessing incredibly embarrassing and incriminating things. I think economics has no way to understand this phenomenon of anonymous confessions. It brings you no material benefit, only a risk that you're going to get caught. Here's one, post-secret. For post-secret, you send in postcards, and then they post your postcards on the web. I never said anything to my parents about being bullied as a kid because I didn't want to disappoint them, but in retrospect, I should have spoken up. I spent my honeymoon under the Golden Gate Bridge. I had thoughts of jumping from the same bridge after she admitted she cheated on me. And so a lot of different confessions. Here's another example, a weird example of people revealing information. I wanted to buy a toaster the other day. I got on Amazon, and there are all these ratings. Like, who's doing these ratings? Like, it's understandable. Suppose that you love your toaster. You want to show gratitude to the toaster company or to Amazon. Or if you hate it, you want to alert other people. But what about all the people who are doing 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars? I think it's a real mystery what's going on. But this is so important for the internet, right, that people do have this desire to reveal information. I've done a qualitative study of the desire to share. I'm getting way over time, aren't I? Am I okay? Okay. Okay, thank you. In a series of open-ended questions, we asked people to describe a time when they were dying to tell someone something. And we were really interested in what motives drove this desire, if sharing could be damaging, if they shared and why or why not, who they told and why. I'm only going to show you a little bit of data from this study, but we asked them what happened when they shared, how the other person reacted, how the sharing made them feel, if the sharing was ultimately damaging. Actually, in another study, we got onto a bunch of these anonymous confession websites. There's some where there's a handle, an anonymous handle, and you can write the person messages. And so we started sending people who confessed to stuff. We sent them messages asking them why they confessed, why they posted, what happened when they posted, did they feel any better after they posted, and so on. We haven't published that study yet. Here's 83% of people we surveyed. This is just regular people, not people who posted to an anonymous website, were able to report something that they were dying to tell someone. And this is, blue are people who actually did share it, and the orange are people who wanted to share, were dying to share, but they didn't share. And so number 1, news about company or coworkers. Number 2, job change. Lots of people do share information about that. A birth or discovery of a pregnancy is a really big one. Professional success. That's people are dying to share professional success, but a majority of people, a majority of people don't share professional success. Actually, there's a huge, who do you think shares more, men or women? Men? Okay, yell at, okay, how many people think that men share more? How many people, I already kind of gave it away, didn't I? How many people think that women share more? Okay, yeah, the second group, you're right, women share more. But the interesting thing is women share a lot more negative stuff, like, and very, very often, they do share, women are much more likely to share bad stuff about themselves, but they're especially likely to share bad stuff about other people. For men, men are much more likely to share positive stuff, and usually it's positive stuff about themselves. Like an amazing fraction of what men share would be well classified as bragging. Like, there are huge gender differences. Do we share positive or negative stuff? It depends, and this is not about gender, that's a separate paper. But about half of what we share is about ourselves, about half of what we share is about other people. Oh, what we want, this is what we desire to share. If you look at what we actually share, 59%, we share 59% of stuff about ourselves, only 40% of stuff we're dying to share about others. And then if we look at stuff that people do share about themselves, you can see, and this is mostly males, and it's overwhelmingly positive. But if you look at what people share about other people, a majority of that is negative stuff. So, all right. Since you've told me I'm not going over time, I want to just read you a few. We asked people to open-ended questions, and I think I'm going to show you 4 quotes that people gave us about situations when they were dying to share. I think there are moments in life when you know something that no one else knows, or a handful of people. That moment feels special and amazing. So it's really pleasurable to know something that other people don't know. But of course, then we have this drive to disclose. That pleasure only lasts so long, and then we have to share it, right? Some truth about the universe, or about your life, or about the lives of people close to you. You can feel special in that moment that it's only you, but then you want to share it because you want others to know. Maybe you don't want it or yourself to be forgotten. Perhaps the joy or sorrow you feel can be spread or tempered, or if you share, or it brings you closer to your friends, or by discussing it, you can make sense of it. This person must be a psychologist. Like, they covered almost all the motives for people to share. Here's another one. When I felt a great urgency to share, it was often about someone with whom I was close to, another person who knew these relationships and understood where the event fit into my life. One of my big current research projects is on the desire to be understood. People really want to feel understood by somebody else, and all it takes really is having one such person, but it's a very powerful motive. Here's the poet. Just little things like walking home tonight, and the streets were so quiet and dark, and the park was so beautiful. I wanted to share the experience. I didn't want it to be just mine. I think that's really beautiful. My best friend is way more extroverted than I am, but he, very weirdly, he often goes biking in the country by himself. He spends a lot of time doing that, even though he's so extroverted. I'm very much of an introvert, but I would never go out to the countryside or travel or anything like that by myself. If I'm not sharing it with somebody else, it's almost as if it hasn't happened. My wife has an iPhone, and for her, if she isn't carrying her iPhone and it's not registering it, then exercise doesn't count. Anyway, last one. Information is currency, the coin of the realm. You negotiate position with juicy information or honoring someone by sharing something exclusive. It's like a newspaper scoop in that way. I think this had to be an economist. The desire to share actually undermines privacy, of course. It also undermines relationships, because one of the most effective, most common ways that we get close to another person is we share information, and we share information that's ever more intimate, and that's how we signal how close we are to the other person, by sharing intimate information. And the fact that people will share kind of everything on the internet with everyone kind of undermines relationship formation. Okay, last one. This is the desire to not obtain information avoidance. There's a lot of different methods we use to avoid information when we think it's going to be uncomfortable. We can just physically avoid it, like we get an email, and we can tell from the subject line and the person who sent it that it's going to be painful, and we don't open our email. We can not pay, someone can be talking to us and we don't like what they're saying to us, we can just not pay attention. Let's say we can't avoid getting the information, we can process it in a biased fashion, or our last line of defense against unpleasant information is we can try to forget what we've been told very quickly. This is a study of what we call the ostrich effect, because ostriches famously, although it's not true, put their head in the sand when they get afraid. And this was with a panel of 1 million investors. We observed their logins and their trades for 2 years, every day for 2 years. And we took this is a big investment website in the US, and we started analyzing the data, and we crashed the website of this huge financial firm because it was such an enormous data processing exercise. So we took a random sample of 100,000 people who didn't have paper, who didn't get information in the mail. And that way we knew that everything that they saw, we could observe. How many people are ostriches? An ostrich is someone, when the market is down, they don't log in. And it turns out that if you look at people who log in enough so you can measure whether or not they're an ostrich, 80% of people are ostriches and 20% of people are not ostriches. I gave a talk about this research, and someone asked me, what about people who are holding bonds? They're not holding stock in their portfolio. And suppose that the stock market goes up and you are holding bonds, you're not holding stock. Is that good news or bad news? So the stock market goes up, but you're not holding stock, you're holding bonds. Good news or bad news? Bad news, okay. And so for that group, we see exactly the opposite pattern. I think I'm probably going too horribly over time, and so I think I'm going to skip this. Okay, let me just show the very bottom. Men log in more than women, but they're also more likely to be ostriches. So men log in a whole lot, but they only log in when they know that they're going to get good news. And the tendency to be an ostrich is positively correlated with the size of your portfolio. The more money you have, the more you would think that if someone had a lot of money, that they would want to have full information, right, about what was happening with their money. But it's quite the opposite. If you have a lot of money, you're more likely to look only when you know the information is going to be good. I'll just say here, we've created a scale to measure how much people are ostriches, whether they seek information or avoid information. And I will show you just one example. There's 3 domains: finance, health, personal. Someone has described you as quirky, which could be interpreted in a positive or a negative sense. Do you want to know which interpretation he intended? And so this is a scale to measure whether you're an information avoider or information seeker based on your answers to these questions. Okay, information avoidance matters. It contributes to confirmation bias, groupthink. It contributes to polarization, because when people avoid information that they think is going to challenge their beliefs, that just reinforces people's beliefs. And it contributes to kind of geographic concentration of political attitudes. All right, last few slides, the kind of conclusion. If you want to understand the perils and the pitfalls, and also some of the gains of the age of information, you need an understanding of psychology. Economics just doesn't go very far towards answering a lot of the important questions. At one time, there was a hope that being exposed to all this information from the internet would make us smarter, more productive, bring about a new, better era of democracy. And now there are more than fears. It's pretty clear that privacy is a luxury of the past. Relationships are being transformed in a negative way by social media. Democracy is getting poisoned rather than enriched. People are getting more instead of less bored. We're used to getting such a flow of information from our phones, from the internet, that our expectations have risen. And so we're expecting to get stimulated all the time. And that's why if you walk across campus, almost everybody who's alone is on the phone. Or if you are cooking dinner, it used to be that if you were cooking dinner or taking care of children, it used to be that's what you did. But now, when you're cooking dinner, you have to multitask, right? You have to listen to a book or a podcast or music at a minimum. And when you see people, parents at the playground with their children, what are they doing? They're always on their phones, right? So we are getting used to getting so much stimulus. Our attention spans are declining. And how many of you students love reading novels? Wow. Okay. And how many of you professors like to read novels? Yeah, a huge, huge difference. And I think that's a reflection of the fact that the people who grew up with the internet and smartphones, your attention spans are declining, and reading a novel requires too much attention. We also get addicted to the internet, and on things like social media, we get addicted to other people paying attention to us. And we're all kind of like, how many likes are we getting? How many friends do we have? And so on. Okay, last slide. There's I believe there's an emerging perspective in the social and behavioral sciences, which has been inspired by these recent developments. We used to think that people were generally accurate information processors, that our goal when we're dealing with information was to arrive at an accurate assessment of the world. And however, we recognize that people's beliefs would be distorted a little bit by things like desires, motivated beliefs, and by expectations, confirmation bias. I think now, in light of things that have happened in the last few years, there's been a complete sea change in our collective academic perspective. I think the new consensus is people believe whatever they want to believe. It doesn't matter what the evidence is at all. And the desire to be consistent and the motivation to make good decisions and maybe a desire for accuracy, these are just minor things that come back and affect these beliefs, which are really reflective of whatever we want to believe. And sorry, this is the last slide. Going back to Stigler, the guy who won the Nobel Prize for the Economics of Information, in his original, in his acceptance speech, he said, one should hardly have to tell academicians that information is a valuable resource. Knowledge is power, and yet it occupies a slum dwelling in the town of economics. Our understanding of economic life will be incomplete if we do not systematically take account of the cold winds of ignorance. I think that's a fantastic quote. And he was a very, very strict economist. But what I have tried to do is persuade you that to understand intelligence and ignorance and so on, it's really important to take account also of psychological factors. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot for coming. That's okay, and for the degree, of course.
Thank you very much, Professor Loewenstein. Very, very interesting. We thank you all for joining us this morning. We invite you to the hall on the main floor of this building for a small reception. Thank you very much.